My name is Bella Carter. I'm 34 years old, and the night my mother left a box on my doorstep, she believed 6 words would still be enough to control me. Don't make a scene. This is family. Our security camera showed my parents placing it beside the front door, returning to their silver sedan, and driving away without knocking. By the time I came home from the farm, it had been sitting there for 43 minutes. I cut through the tape with my truck key. The first photograph showed my 8-year-old son walking out of school. The second showed him behind our barn. The third had been taken through his bedroom window while he changed for bed. Beneath the photographs was a custody petition bearing my parents' names. Someone had highlighted 3 phrases: emotionally unstable mother, unsafe rural environment, and immediate grandparent intervention recommended. Then, I found a black device wrapped in tissue paper. A green light blinked beneath the casing. The handwritten label beside it read, "Replacement Unit. Install beneath child's backpack lining." My knees weakened as I dialed 911. Minutes later, my husband stepped through the doorway, saw the photographs covering the floor, and stopped so sharply that the screen door struck his shoulder. Everyone froze. He picked up the petition and stared at the signature on the final page. "Please don't tell me," he whispered. "They actually did it, Nick." But the signature wasn't the worst thing inside that box. The final envelope revealed why my parents had been watching my son and why they needed me declared unfit before Friday. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope and what my mother was willing to destroy to get my child, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels tonight. My husband's name is Ethan Carter. He had always been the calm one in our marriage, but as he examined the photographs, a vein tightened beside his temple. "These weren't all taken from the road," he said. One image showed our son Liam asleep against his pillow. The angle was too high for someone standing outside, which meant whoever took it had climbed onto the rain barrel beneath his window. Mud marks had appeared there 2 weeks earlier. I had blamed an animal. Ethan locked the doors while I explained everything to the emergency dispatcher. Repeated surveillance, a tracker meant for a child's backpack, photographs taken through a bedroom window, and documents suggesting an attempt to remove our son from our custody. The dispatcher asked whether the people responsible had threatened to return. I looked at the note. "They didn't have to," I said. "Leaving this here was the threat." While we waited for deputies, Ethan put on gloves and moved the contents onto the dining table. I photographed each layer before he touched it. The paper, note, custody petition, tracker, and 4 envelopes marked school, medical, home, and witnesses. My mother had always collected information like other people collected weapons. The school envelope contained Liam's class schedule, teacher's name, pickup times, and license plates belonging to parents who occasionally drove him home from robotics club. The medical envelope contained pediatric summaries neither Ethan nor I had shared. In the margin beside Liam's asthma diagnosis, my mother had written, "Chronic respiratory risk made worse by farm exposure." The home envelope contained photographs of our barn, propane tank, well house, kitchen, upstairs hallway, gun safe, and Liam's bedroom. Some had clearly been taken through windows. Others could only have been taken inside the house. A photograph of our locked gun safe had been captured with the utility room door open. Ethan stared at it. "Your parents were here after the harvest fundraiser." 3 months earlier, nearly 70 neighbors attended an event in our barn. People moved between the barn and house to use the bathrooms, and my parents claimed they left early. My mother could have entered unnoticed, photographed the room, and returned before anyone missed her. At the bottom of one page, she had written, "Unlocked access during public gathering demonstrates careless security." She had created the danger, then documented it as proof of my negligence. The witness's envelope contained drafted statements attributed to people we knew. Liam's teacher, our neighbor, the church secretary, a supplier, and my closest friend, Sarah Miller. The statements called me exhausted, detached, impulsive, and isolated. None had signatures, but each had a blank line and the following day's date. "They were planning to get these signed," Ethan said. or make it look like they were. The final envelope contained a petition requesting emergency temporary custody of Liam. My parents had signed declarations claiming he faced imminent psychological and physical harm in our home. Attached was a financial disclosure, showing they had placed $250,000 into a trust for his relocation. Private education and therapy. The amount made no sense until I reached the last document. It was a purchase agreement for our farm. My parents had promised the property to a developer planning a luxury equestrian community. They did not own our land, but the contract claimed they expected to obtain control through guardianship and conservatorship proceedings. The developer had already paid them $50,000. If they delivered the land by the end of the month, they would receive another $700,000. The custody case was not only about Liam. They planned to portray me as unstable, remove my son, pressure me into treatment, challenge my ability to manage the farm, and seize the land my grandmother had left directly to me. Ethan read the agreement twice. They sold land they don't own. They sold my breakdown, I said. They were counting on creating one. My parents had always treated obedience as proof of sanity. When I studied agriculture instead of business, they called me reckless. When I married Ethan instead of the attorney they preferred, they called me confused. When I refused to sell the farm, they told relatives I was trapped by grief. Every disagreement became evidence that something was wrong with me. Now they had turned that family story into a legal strategy. They expected me to panic and beg for an explanation. Instead, they had delivered their entire plan to my front door. Deputy Marcus Blake and Deputy Alina Ruiz arrived 20 minutes later. I told them Liam was safe at Ethan's sister's house, where he had gone after school to work on a science project with his cousin. For once, an ordinary family plan kept him away from the nightmare unfolding at home. Deputy Ruiz photographed the box, sealed the tracker in an evidence bag, and examined the note. Deputy Blake walked the property with Ethan. They found compressed mud on the rain barrel, scratches beneath Liam's window, 2 partial shoe prints near the hedge, and a trail camera disguised with artificial bark behind the barn. It pointed directly at our back door. Ethan had never installed it. The memory card was still inside. Deputy Blake removed it and asked whether my parents had keys. They had one emergency key, I admitted. I took it back last year. Did you change the locks? No, taking back a key meant nothing if someone had copied it. Deputy Ruiz asked about our history. I told her about the money my father deposited into my account after Liam was born. He called it a gift, but my mother later handed me conditions. Weekly visits, access to medical records, approval over child care, and permission to influence education. When I returned the money, they told relatives Ethan had forced me to reject help. I described the anonymous child services complaint from when Liam was 4. The caller claimed he wandered unsupervised among machinery. An investigator found our property secure and closed the case. My parents had acted outraged that anyone would target us. Now, I suspected they had made the report. I also described the year my mother called my doctor and said I was suffering from postpartum depression. I had struggled after Liam's birth, sought counseling, and recovered. My mother later retold that period as a psychiatric crisis she had managed. In the custody petition, those months became a documented history of maternal instability. Deputy Ruiz stopped writing. Seeking counseling does not make someone unfit. I know that now. They spent years teaching me otherwise. When the deputies examined the tracking device, Ethan brought Liam's backpack from the mudroom. Deputy Blake found a small section of lining that had been opened and resewn with thread that did not match. Inside was an empty sleeve shaped exactly like the tracker from the box. The replacement unit had not yet been installed because another tracker was already there. The deputies found it beneath the foam at the bottom of the bag. It had likely transmitted Liam's location for weeks. That discovery changed the room. My mother had last handled the backpack 6 weeks earlier after claiming coffee spilled on it during Sunday lunch. She carried it into the laundry room alone, then returned it perfectly dry. Since then, she had mysteriously known about a pediatric visit across town, a roadside market we had stopped at once, and a camping trail we never mentioned. I had mistaken surveillance for maternal intuition. Deputy Ruiz photographed 2 anonymous emails we had received accusing us of violating labor laws by making Liam work on the farm. He did not work. He fed rabbits, collected eggs when he wanted, and helped label vegetables under supervision. The wording matched phrases in the custody petition. The deputies contacted a county investigator and explained that arrests would depend on forensic proof, entry methods, device ownership, and state law. They could document the scene, preserve evidence, warn my parents not to return, and help us pursue an emergency protection order. They did not offer a dramatic solution. They offered steps. I called family law attorney Rachel Lawson, who had handled a property dispute for us before. She told us not to confront my parents alone, not to post online, and not to alert the developer. The box was meant to intimidate you, she said, but it also contains admissions, motive, and planning documents. Preserve everything. My phone rang. Mom appeared on the screen. Deputy Ruiz advised me to let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, a message arrived. You opened it. Good. Tomorrow at 10:00. Come alone and we can keep strangers out of this. Then another. Do not involve Ethan. His employment history won't survive scrutiny. Years before we met, Ethan had been blamed for a transport accident caused by faulty brakes. He eventually proved the company had failed to maintain the vehicle, but the old dispute remained searchable. My parents had always treated it as a weapon. Deputy Ruiz photographed both messages. I typed nothing. For the first time, silence was not surrender. It was evidence. Sarah Miller arrived after 10:00 carrying a laptop, a locked pouch, and a look I had never seen before. She placed everything on the table and said, "Before you blame yourself for missing this, you need to know I didn't tell you everything." She removed a recorder, 2 printed emails, and a USB drive. 6 months earlier, my parents had invited her to lunch. They claimed they were worried about my workload and believed Ethan controlled me. Then they began asking questions that sounded like an interrogation. Did I drink after difficult days? Did Liam miss school during harvest? Did Ethan keep firearms? Had I complained about anxiety? On her way back from the restroom, Sarah heard my father speaking in a private dining room to regional property developer Grant Holloway. The door was partly open. My father said, "Once the boy is with us, she won't fight for long. The farm is the only thing making her believe she can live without the family." Holloway asked whether the title could be transferred. My father replied, "Not directly, but pressure works faster than court. She'll sell to fund the case or sign management authority while she's under evaluation." Sarah recorded the final minutes. When she left, my mother confronted her in the parking lot and threatened to expose an old financial mistake made by Sarah's brother unless she stayed away from family business. The issue had been resolved years earlier, but Sarah feared harming him, so she stayed quiet and began gathering proof. My mother later asked her to confirm that I had once fallen asleep while Liam watched television. I had been exhausted after a livestock emergency, but Ethan was sitting in the same room. My mother removed that detail from the statement she wanted signed. My father then offered to donate $15,000 to Sarah's nonprofit after she finalized the statement. When she refused, the nonprofit received an anonymous complaint accusing her of misusing donor funds. An audit cleared her, but one allegation repeated a phrase from my father's email. They weren't only building a case against you. They were creating reasons no one would defend you. Rachel joined by video call and asked Sarah to play the recording. My father's voice filled the room. "She'll react emotionally. That's the useful part. We present concern she gives us instability." Holloway asked about Ethan. My father answered, "Debt, inconsistent work history, anger issues if properly provoked." Then my mother said, "Bella always chooses pride over peace. Give her a frightening enough choice and she'll destroy her own credibility." The box had been bait. They wanted me terrified enough to explode on camera. That explained the warning. Don't make a scene. They expected me to make one. Rachel had us build a full chronology. We covered the table with cards showing every intrusion: the child services complaint, contact with my doctor, unexplained knowledge of our location, the copied key, staged photographs, threats against Sarah, anonymous emails, custody documents, developer payment, and deadline. The pattern was unmistakable. Each time I resisted an outside institution, suddenly questioned my competence. My parents understood that direct control made them look cruel. Concern made them look responsible. Rachel called it coercive narrative building. Sarah called it erasing my version of my own life. Detective Jordan Wells arrived near midnight. He examined the agreement and asked whether my parents had any ownership in the farm. I showed him the deed, my grandmother's will, and a letter she wrote before her death. She had left the farm directly to me because my father repeatedly pressured her to sell. She warned me never to give him financial authority, no matter how loving the request sounded. The detective read the final paragraph twice. Your grandmother expected a dispute. She expected my father. He collected the trackers, trail camera, original documents, and security footage showing my parents placing the box beneath our camera. My father had looked directly into the lens before leaving. He wanted us to know who sent it. At 12:07 a.m., my mother messaged again. 10 tomorrow, last opportunity. After that, professionals take over. Rachel smiled without humor. She's right. Professionals are taking over. By 2:00 in the morning, we had prepared declarations for an emergency order, changed the locks, preserved every file, and warned Liam's school. Before leaving, Detective Wells told us my parents might escalate once intimidation failed. What does escalation look like? I asked. He glanced at the unsigned statements. Trying to make their accusations become true. At 8:40 the next morning, Rachel filed our emergency petition. At 9:05, Liam's school confirmed my parents had called twice asking whether they could pick him up. They could not. The principal placed an alert on his record. At 9:22, our insurance agent called after someone reported an unsecured fuel leak beside our machinery shed. The fire marshal was already coming. At 9:31, animal control vehicles entered our driveway after a complaint that our horses lacked water and shelter. Both reports were false. Our fuel system had recently passed inspection, and the horses had automatic waterers, clean stalls, and pasture access. My parents were trying to create official reports before filing for custody. We welcomed every inspector. Ethan walked the fire marshal through the shed while I showed veterinary records and feed schedules to animal control. Both agencies documented that the complaints were unfounded. At 9:48, my parents' silver sedan appeared at the gate. They were early for a meeting I had never agreed to attend. My father tried the old gate code twice, then climbed over. My mother followed while holding her phone at chest level, camera facing outward. They were recording. Rachel had warned us not to engage, so Ethan called the sheriff's office while I remained behind the locked glass door. My mother knocked 3 times. Bella, open the door. We need to prevent this from becoming uglier. You are trespassing. Law enforcement is on the way. Her caring expression returned instantly. This is exactly the overreaction we're worried about. My father raised his voice for the recording. We came peacefully because we love our grandson. You responded with threats. I told you to leave private property. We are your parents. That is not a property right. My mother angled the phone to capture both her wounded face and mine. You sound agitated. Is Liam inside? We need to know he's safe. He is safe, and you know he's at school because you called there this morning. Her expression changed. She realized we knew. My father stepped closer. Open the door. We can resolve the land issue and custody misunderstanding privately. There is no misunderstanding. You accepted money for land you don't own. My mother lowered the phone. My father went still. Who told you? You did. You left the contract in the box. My mother turned on him. You said you removed that. He ignored her. The agreement was preliminary. The farm is financially unsustainable. You promised control after having me declared unstable. We were creating leverage. The words escaped before he could stop them. My mother hissed his name, but our doorbell camera had captured everything. I asked who photographed Liam in his bedroom. She claimed they hired a licensed professional. I held up the picture of our gun safe. My father said the room had been opened during the fundraiser. So one of you entered. You invited us. To the barn, not to search my house. Ethan stepped into view behind me. I'm standing beside my wife. That's the part neither of you could buy. My father pointed at him. You are why she abandoned her family. No, I said. He's why I learned family doesn't require surrender. Deputies arrived minutes later. Deputy Ruiz ordered my parents away from the porch. My father claimed the gate malfunctioned and said they entered because I had missed a scheduled meeting. My mother pointed to the official vehicles and said multiple complaints proved their concern was shared. The animal control officer stepped forward and confirmed both complaints were unfounded. The fire marshal did the same. Their attempt to create evidence had produced witnesses against them. Detective Wells arrived and asked whether they placed the box on our porch. My father admitted they had. My mother called it an honest attempt to begin a conversation. He asked whether the box contained a GPS tracker labeled for installation in Liam's backpack. She claimed she could not remember. When he showed her the device found inside the existing backpack, her eyes moved toward my father. Wells explained that forensic review could identify the account, payment method, and location history. My father demanded an attorney, ending further questioning. As the deputies prepared to escort them off the property, a black SUV pulled in. Grant Holloway stepped out carrying site plans. He greeted my father before noticing the police. My father hurried toward him. This meeting is canceled. Holloway looked at me. You're Bella Carter? I own this property. He frowned. Your father represented that he controlled the family trust. There is no family trust. My mother said the guardianship process was expected to establish authority. Holloway's face drained. Rachel arrived and handed him notice that my parents had no right to market, encumber, or transfer the farm. She ordered him to preserve every payment record, agreement, and communication. You gave us a title summary, Holloway told my father. A false one? My father said nothing. Holloway returned to his SUV and began making calls. Their expected $700,000 payoff disappeared in minutes. As my father turned away, papers slipped from his leather folder. One was a default notice on their home equity loan. Another listed investment losses exceeding $400,000. A third was a demand from a private lender. Their concern for Liam had always been a disguise. They had borrowed heavily, gambled on a failed project, and planned to repay everything with the developer's money. My farm was not their legacy plan. It was their escape route. Before noon, my parents filed their custody petition. They did not know Rachel had already warned the court and submitted our evidence. Their attorney described them as concerned grandparents responding to a family crisis. He attached photographs of machinery, our propane tank, gun safe, Liam feeding rabbits, my postpartum counseling history, Ethan's old employment dispute, and that morning's regulatory complaints. Each piece collapsed under context. The equipment photographs had metadata showing they were taken from a restricted area. The gun safe image proved unauthorized entry because the safe was locked. Child Services had closed the old case without findings. Ethan's former employer had settled after records confirmed brake failure. The new complaints had been investigated and rejected before the petition was filed. The judge scheduled an emergency video hearing that afternoon. My mother appeared in a pale sweater without jewelry, presenting herself as a frightened grandmother. Their attorney called the box an imperfect attempt at cooperation and described the tracker as a safety device purchased after Liam allegedly wandered away at a county fair. Liam had never wandered away. My mother claimed I called her in panic after losing him for 40 minutes. She gave a date. Our photo archive showed Liam at home with influenza that day, and pharmacy receipts proved Ethan collected his medicine that morning. The affair had occurred 2 weeks later, and my parents were not with us. The judge asked who installed the tracker. My father claimed ignorance. My mother suggested Ethan did it. Then Ethan produced registration information obtained by Detective Wells. The tracker was connected to my mother's email and credit card. Records showed she had checked Liam's location 86 times in 5 weeks. Her attorney asked for a recess. The judge first required an answer. My mother admitted viewing the data because she feared for Liam's safety. Did his parents consent? The judge asked. No, but Bella refuses reasonable help. That sentence exposed everything. My mother believed refusal turned invasion into responsibility. Rachel then played Sarah's recording. My father's voice described using custody pressure to force a sale. My mother predicted I would react emotionally and destroy my credibility. Their lawyer challenged the recording, but the judge considered it relevant to immediate motive and risk. Sarah testified about the pre-written statement, the threat against her brother, and my father's promised nonprofit donation. She read his email aloud. Once your statement is finalized, I will be pleased to direct the contribution. The judge asked whether the statement was truthful. No, Sarah said. It removed everything that made Bella look responsible and added conclusions I never expressed. Liam's principal submitted a declaration stating that my mother tried to remove him from school and obtain attendance records while pretending to be his court-appointed guardian. No guardianship existed. Detective Wells then submitted preliminary findings on the trail camera. It had been purchased by a private investigator through a shell company paid for my parents' account. Images showed my mother walking behind our house after 2:00 in the morning on 3 different nights. In one, she carried a key. My father claimed any copied key had been retained accidentally. Exterior footage showed a figure entering through our side door and leaving 19 minutes later. The coat matched the one my mother wore in the trail camera image. The bedroom photograph had not been taken from a public location. My mother had entered while we slept. I remembered waking one night to a floorboard near Liam's room. Ethan checked the hallway and found nothing. She may have been hiding in the dark only seconds away. Rachel asked me to describe the danger. They need control of my property to solve their financial problems. They need control of my son to pressure me. Every act they call concern was hidden because they knew I would not consent. I am asking the court to protect Liam from people who believe loving him gives them permission to track him, photograph him in private, enter his home at night, contact his school under false authority, and manufacture evidence against his parents. My father interrupted. This is rehearsed. She has always been dramatic. The judge warned him to remain silent, then said, the dramatic conduct before the court includes nighttime entry, covert tracking, attempted unauthorized school pickup, false property representations, and coordinated unsubstantiated complaints. My mother began crying. Her tears had ended arguments throughout my childhood. Relatives would pressure me to apologize, and the original harm disappeared beneath the accusation that I had hurt her. This time, I did nothing. The judge granted a temporary protection order. My parents were forbidden from contacting Liam, approaching our home or his school, surveilling us, accessing location data, contacting witnesses, or using relatives to send messages. They were ordered to surrender keys, photographs, recordings, and devices connected to our household. Their request for temporary guardianship was denied, and suspected false statements and surveillance were referred to investigators. My mother said, "You're taking our grandson because our daughter hates us." The judge answered, "No. Your documented conduct created these restrictions." That was the sentence my parents could not rewrite. Revenge did not arrive as one perfect victory. It arrived as lost access, preserved evidence, frozen payments, and doors they could no longer open. The consequences unfolded over 7 months. Investigators confirmed that my parents hired a private detective to monitor our vehicles, photograph Liam, and question neighbors. He claimed they had presented themselves as legal guardians conducting a safety assessment. Once he learned that was false, he surrendered invoices, emails, images, and recorded instructions. My father had asked him to capture photographs that made the farm look dangerous. He wanted pictures of Liam near tractors, but rejected any showing Ethan beside him. My mother requested images through the bedroom window because the court needs to see how isolated the child is. She also ordered him to omit family dinners, school events, church gatherings, and friends visiting our home. They were not documenting Liam's life. They were editing it. My mother faced charges connected to unlawful entry, unauthorized tracking, and surveillance. My father was investigated over false documents and representations made to the developer. The company sued to recover its advance, legal costs, and investigation expenses. Because my parents had already spent much of the money covering debts, they tried to refinance their house. The lender discovered the claims, the refinancing collapsed, and the property was eventually listed for sale. We filed a civil action for invasion of privacy, trespass, interference with family relationships, and the costs of legal representation and security upgrades. I did not sue for revenge money. I sued because without enforceable consequences, they would treat every boundary as temporary. At the permanent protection order hearing, my mother still called the tracker a safety measure, and my father insisted the development deal would have saved the farm. Neither admitted that our consent mattered. The judge extended the order for 5 years. They were barred from contacting Liam, possessing images taken inside our home, or distributing parenting allegations without acknowledging that their custody petition had been denied. Several relatives initially defended them. My aunt said frightened grandparents sometimes made mistakes. A cousin accused me of humiliating the family. I sent them the court findings and stopped arguing. Some apologized. Others vanished. Losing them hurt, but it taught me that people who demand silence to preserve family harmony are often asking you to carry the cost of someone else's behavior. Sarah's nonprofit reopened the anonymous complaint and confirmed it had been retaliatory. Her brother disclosed his old financial mistake to his current employer, who already knew and considered the matter resolved. My parents' threat survived only because shame kept it hidden. Ethan and I changed more than the locks. We installed cameras, added privacy film, revised school permissions, and met with a child therapist who helped us explain the situation to Liam without making him feel responsible. We told him his grandparents had broken important safety rules and would not visit for a long time. He asked whether they still loved him. I said they may feel love, but love does not make unsafe choices safe. Near the end of summer, a letter arrived through my parents' attorney. My father wrote that their house was being sold. Several friends had stopped speaking to them, and the church committee had asked them to step down. He blamed the public spectacle for destroying their standing. We had never posted evidence, contacted their friends, or publicly exposed them. The truth spread because their conduct involved too many witnesses to remain hidden. He ended with one sentence: "You will regret teaching your son that family can be discarded." Months earlier, those words would have poisoned me. I would have imagined empty holidays and blamed myself. Now I saw the manipulation. He was not apologizing for tracking Liam, entering our home, threatening Sarah, fabricating allegations, or trying to sell my land. He was accusing me because I refused to teach my son that family must be tolerated no matter what it does. I was teaching him something else. Family must be accountable. The civil case ended in settlement. My parents surrendered any claimed interest in the farm, paid part of our legal and security costs, and agreed never to seek contact or custody without court approval. The remaining amount was secured against proceeds from the sale of their house. We did not receive a fortune. Legal action consumed money, time, and energy, but the settlement removed every tool they had tried to use against us. No access, no leverage, no authority, no secret key. The final confrontation happened outside the courthouse. My clear's throat, Father stopped beside his attorney's car while a deputy stood nearby. "You think you won?" he said. "This was never about winning," I answered. "It was about making sure you couldn't do it again." My mother lifted her chin. "Liam will grow up and learn what you took from him. He'll learn what I protected him from." My father said, "You destroyed your own family." "No, I stopped you from destroying mine." They walked away. That afternoon, Ethan, Sarah, Liam, and I returned to the farm. Liam changed into old boots and helped release 2 rescued goats into their new enclosure. Sarah recorded them racing across the pasture, while Ethan laughed as one tried to eat Liam's shirt. I stood beside the porch where the box had been left. For months, I had avoided that spot. In my mind, it remained covered with photographs, false statements, and pieces of a plan meant to dismantle my life. But the boards had been scrubbed, the locks were new, and Liam's laughter carried across the yard. The place no longer belonged to the memory. Calling the police did not solve everything that night. The officers did not immediately arrest my parents. The court did not erase years of harm, and healing did not arrive with one dramatic speech. Healing was learning not to answer every accusation. It was allowing evidence to speak where guilt once spoke for me. It was watching my son sleep without wondering who stood outside his window. My mother left a box on my doorstep with one warning: don't make a scene. She expected silence to protect her. Instead, I opened the box, called for help, and created a record. Sometimes the strongest revenge is not destroying the people who harmed you. It is removing their power, exposing the pattern they depended on, and building a life they can no longer enter without permission. So, tell me honestly, if you found photographs of your child, a hidden tracker, and a custody plan, would you settle privately because the people responsible were your parents? Or would you call the police, too? We hope this story gave you both entertained and something meaningful to think about. This is a fictional narrative created only for dramatic storytelling and educational value. We hope it reminds you that not every person who loses you deserve a way back into your life. Some doors close because keeping them open would only allow the same pain to return in a different form.